Welcome back! Sharon here with the next installment of your Firestop Coffee Break training. In this video, we're going to introduce you to the Hot Rod XL Firestop device and explain how to use it in a 1 or 2 hour fire-rated gypsum wall that lands underneath the flat concrete deck. So you could be talking about a post-tension deck or maybe a hollow core concrete slab. If your project is going to use the Hot Rod XL, we want you to be able to know that it's installed right. That means that you need to understand the Firestop details and how the product should be installed. No matter what Firestop material you're going to use on a project, you want to know that it's done right. So if you're using sealants or sprays, please be sure to watch the other videos. If you're dealing with fire-rated shafts, flat decks, fluted deck, there's a whole series of videos that are designed to help you know that the Firestop installations meet the building codes, the specifications of your project, as well as the industry standards. For now, however, I'm excited to be able to show you the Hot Rod XL. That is this device right here. The Hot Rod XL pairs the Hot Rod's compressible foam with this intumescent Firestop strip that will expand to fill the deflection gap and prevent the movement of fire, smoke, and toxic gases to the non-fire side of the wall. This section here will receive the drywall mud when the wall is being finished, and then this piece helps keep the mud out of the joint. This section here can be removed once the joint compound is installed if the finished installation is going to be visible, or you can leave it in place if you prefer. The last part is this flexible leg that covers the Hot Rod compressible Firestop and gives the product a clean finish. You can paint it or leave it exposed depending on what your designer wants. The Hot Rod XL offers excellent STC values and L ratings. We talked about these in the Hot Rod Type X segment, but I want to ask you a question about this. Who on your project is responsible for ensuring that the Firestop details meet the STC and L rating requirements? I can't really answer that question for you. The answer is likely buried in your contract somewhere. I'm just pointing it out so that you know that someone should be looking at these things. If that someone happens to be you, then here's a quick rundown on what to look for. For the STC values, that information will be listed in the product data sheet. That is, if it was tested to provide an STC value. If the fire-rated joint detail was tested according to UL 2079, which is the standard for fire-resistant building joints, then the same upper panel of the UL detail where you see the hourly rating, the lower segment will also show you the L rating. Now, there's more to it than just looking to see if there's an L rating in that section, but again, we'll get into that on a video on L ratings and smoke barriers. If you want to join us for that, just let me know. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the installation of the Hot Rod XL. Again, we'll be working with the detail HWD0624, just like we did with the Hot Rod Type X. So some of this will sound familiar, but I want to recap quickly. We can use the Hot Rod XL for both 1 and 2 hour rated walls. Check. You can see the same joint width, and you know that we'll have to dig into the detail a little bit to see what joint sizes we can use, as well as what movement requirements we can expect when we're using the Hot Rod XL. This will be about our rated floor. You can see that it'll be a minimum of 4.5 inch lightweight or normal weight concrete, or possibly a hollow core concrete slab. Now we'll look at the specifics of a rated wall. You'll need to review the actual UL listed details for all of the specifics of the connections, framing members, and studs. But you can see here that you're able to use any U400 or V400 wall assembly as long as the rest of the system requirements noted in the detail match the field application. Now remember, you need to check everything. Do you have the right size framing member with the right depth, the right gauge, and are they using Type X drywall? All of those little parts and pieces of your fire-rated wall are important. Let's see what the detail says about the joint when they're working with the Hot Rod XL. The allowable joint size and movement capacity will vary depending on the product being installed. Now, you know that from looking at the header of the Firestop detail. Let's look a little bit closer. This section of the UL listed detail shows us that the Firestop installation is going to be found in 3A4. So that means the maximum installed joint width is 3/4 inch, and the movement capacity will be 80% compression and 33% extension. So we're going to change gears here and look at how to evaluate the installation of the Firestop head wall devices to be sure that they're installed properly. Now, it doesn't matter if you're an architect, an owner, the general contractor, the pre-construction team, the drywaller, the Firestop installer, a building official. Maybe you're part of the QA/QC team or even the third-party special inspector. This last section is critical to ensuring that the products are installed properly, so let's walk through this together. To do that, you'll have to revisit the Firestop details. Now, this is an exercise that you should do with every single Firestop installation, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about rated joints or through penetrations. You simply can't properly evaluate a field installation without comparing it to the listed system. So, let's take a look at the installation of the Hot Rod XL. This one can actually be installed 2 different ways. It can be installed after the drywall goes up, in which case it would go in like this. The foam segment compresses against the concrete and the white flexible gasket will disguise the fire stop while the mud leg will get covered with tape and mud. The other way that it could be installed is to simply staple it to the drywall before the drywall gets hung. And then when the drywall is installed, the Hot Rod XL will go against the concrete and this compressible member will press against the deck above. Let's look at what the detail says. You can see here the last line, it says the perforated leg may be attached with 1/2-inch staples every 6 to 8 inches. May means that you can do it if you want, but it's not a requirement. It gives you the option to do whatever works best for your installation. Now, you know I was a kindergarten teacher, so I want to ask you to use your imagination for a moment. I want to ask you to think about the last project that you worked on that had a PT deck. Literally, picture the PT deck. Was there any variation, any humps in that floor slab? The Hot Rod XL will easily accommodate this variation and still maintain your fire rating and your L rating. Now, I would love to say that the Hot Rod XL and the other devices that you see in this series can't be installed wrong because it just doesn't sound reasonable that anyone would install this thing backwards or upside down. But to be clear, that doesn't mean that it won't be subject to special inspection on projects where it's required. Because as we'll discuss, you have to make sure of little things to make sure that they're done right. It just means that the Hot Rod Type X, the Hot Rod XL, the fire bead, and the fire gasket are all considered devices, and they will not require destructive testing if the inspections are properly coordinated. The inspection standard requires a pre-construction meeting, and it's a good idea to discuss the stages that will be required so that everything is coordinated properly. The same is true for any other head of wall installation, especially if you're looking at shaft wall assembly. Let me explain this a little bit. The International Building Code requires third-party special inspection of fire stop for certain buildings. And when you're on a project that requires special inspection of fire stop, that would be a high-rise risk category 3 or risk category 4, you'll want to be sure that you schedule your inspection during the right phase, and that should be discussed during the pre-construction meeting. Even when you use fire stop devices, you still need to meet the inspection requirements. But that's a discussion for another video. What I want to share with you here is that when you have destructive testing, you have challenges. First, you have to be sure that someone's schedule is to have the destructive samples repaired. And second, you have to be sure that the fire stop team is aware of the location of all the samples so that nothing gets missed. But when you use fire stop devices, assuming that you schedule things properly, you can eliminate the risk that your special inspector's destructive samples don't get repaired simply because destructive testing isn't going to be a requirement. But again, I want to point out the use of devices in head of wall installations does not mean you can forego inspections. It just means you don't have to do destructive testing. And when things are scheduled properly, that will speed up the overall inspection process. However, when it comes to inspecting devices, there is a specific sequence in which they should be inspected. And this can change when you're looking at shaft wall assemblies versus a standard gypsum wall. It will be clear as you look over your fire stop details, but we'll give you more on that later. We're getting close to the end, but before we go, let's talk about some more critical elements to the proper installation of our Hot Rod XL. First, fire stop must be installed on both sides of the wall, but you knew that already. Second, and this is true with all fire stop installations, but it kind of needs to be pointed out when we're talking about any devices for rated joints. There cannot be any gaps. The Hot Rod XL comes in 10-foot lengths, so you should check every 10 feet to make sure that the devices are tightly butted. That means no gaps where you connect one piece to the next. No gaps. No gaps above, no gaps below, no gaps at the corners. You get the idea, right? But let's say it one more time just to hammer it home. You can't have any gaps. And that will hold true for all the fire stop devices that we're looking at. But here's the thing. If you do have gaps, it's not the end of the world. You can reach out to the fire stop manufacturer and get an engineering judgment that will allow you to put fire stop sealant in that gap. Let's do a quick recap when you're looking at the field installations. Check the seams every 10 feet to be sure the butt joints are tight. Check the inside corners to make sure they're tight. Check the outside corners as well. Fire stop is required on both sides of the wall, so you'll need to check both sides of the wall. If you're working with a shaft wall assembly, be sure that you're using a shaft wall detail and not this one. If you have any questions, let me know. Some builders build, and when the project is done, so are they. Other builders have lifelong clients, so when a project is done, they'll still show up to fixed issues. If you're that sort of builder, or if you're responsible for specifying materials for the owner, or even if you're the facility maintenance team, I want you to think about the life cycle of the building for a moment. NFPA requires regular inspections of many types of existing buildings. If you have fire barriers and you use FireStop devices like these, you don't have to worry about the L ratings on your smoke barriers that we've talked about before, because all of these devices are designed and tested to remain flexible. But the key to these products maintaining their L ratings is that they're not connected to the concrete or to the drywall. So there's no way for them to become dislodged like you may have seen with sealant installations. It doesn't matter if your building is subject to basic thermal or wind movement or even live load, not to mention the concerns that you might have for the life cycle of your building if you're in a seismic area. This intumescent portion of these preformed FireStop products, this bit right here, this is the part that will expand to fill the joint in a fire scenario. And they've been age tested through UL to provide long-term FireStop performance, while the vinyl profile that encompasses the intumescent material is made from highly flexible vinyl that will bend and mold around uneven surfaces. If you're writing the specifications, is this something that's important to you? Is it important to your client? If you worry about the long-term performance of your FireStop projects, you may want to consider these types of FireStop devices and reach out for more information or help with your specifications. And with that, we're at the end of our second video on FireStop devices. Did you notice that there was new information in this video that wasn't in the last one? We have 2 more videos and they are peppered with new information as well. So please be sure that you watch those so that you don't miss anything important. If you have a project with fluted metal decks, you obviously can't use these FireStop details and things get a little more complex. You guessed it, we have a video series on that as well, and I hope you can join us. So before you run, I want to say thank you for spending this time with me. I sincerely hope that this video series helps you understand FireStop better so that you can build better. If it did, please share with your teams. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or the FireStop manufacturers. I'll give you all the contact information at the end of this video. We're happy to help anyone who wants to do things right. And if you want to help me and you found this video useful, please share, like, and comment on your favorite social media so that others can see this as well. Bye for now, and I look forward to seeing you on your next coffee break.